All right, let's talk about DeAndre Swift. Right now, he's RB26, just before James Conner. I know you like Conner a lot better. David Montgomery is another guy that Swift is going ahead of in the ADP I'm looking at here, but RB26 for DeAndre Swift. Jamie, where do you have DeAndre Swift?
Just in that same range. I think, again, it's just a matter of where I probably had him, which was a couple spots I think too high. But I still think he's the best Eagles running back to take. You should take him first. We talked about this yesterday. Is his work in the passing game a negative for what this offense is? The fact that they were using him a lot more in passing down plays. But look, that's clearly a strength for him. And is that something that this Eagles offense sort of develops a little bit more? As you noted, Adam, yesterday, fewest running back targets in 2022. And so was that more a Miles Sanders thing, or was that more an offense thing? And they did have a change in their offensive coaching staff, with Shane Steichen leaving and their quarterbacks coach now being promoted offense coordinator, who there's still some question about who's going to call plays there in Philadelphia, because that's something Nick Sirianni did previously before giving that to Steichen. So I think it's an interesting wrinkle that could help DeAndre Swift, but still somewhat of a negative unless they just completely alter their philosophy. But it was just more a matter of, I wanted Cook higher, I wanted Kamara higher until there's a suspension, and he just dropped a couple of spots.
All right. Dave, do you share the concerns about DeAndre Swift?
What does he do if he doesn't catch 4 passes a game? Does he even get 6 carries, 7 carries a game if Rashad Penny's healthy? I think his path to, being a great fantasy running back is if Penny gets hurt, which, I think that's probably going to happen, and then he stays healthy, which I don't know if that's going to happen. They love him as a pass catcher. I'm sure that they're going to utilize him in that way. I just don't know if they're going to utilize him enough. He is my 30th ranked running back in full PPR, and I would take him in round 7.
But does anyone have a little FOMO here on Swift, that you're talking about a great offense, and no one's going to argue that. Great offense, maybe best offensive line in football, and a running back that has kind of been a stud. He's been great.
Mm-hmm.
So that combination is really exciting.
Which running back are you talking about there?
Well, yeah,
Penny's been great when he's been healthy.
He has been. I wonder how all of the injuries might take a toll on him. But no, you're absolutely right. But Penny is the one guy. I don't love to buy into injury prone. If there was one player,
yeah, no, I get you.
It's Penny. But Swift obviously has concerns too. I get my question though: are you concerned about missing out on an explosive player? Because that is one of his strengths. He makes explosive plays on an offense that is going to also create a lot of explosive plays. I do have a little bit of DeAndre Swift FOMO, but I also see huge bust potential.
Yes. No, I don't see huge bust potential at this spot. So I think that's kind of where it comes into play. Like I think round 7, if this is the spot where he's going to go, it's worth taking the chance on, especially if you have a heavy wide receiver build, because this is the type of guy that if he does hit and your receivers and, let's say, tight end, quarterback, whatever the combination of your first 6 picks are, he's a potential difference maker. But again, he's been banged up. The thing that you sort of can compare a little bit is, yes, this Eagles offensive line is on a different level. The Detroit offensive line wasn't bad last year. He was sharing clearly with Jamal Williams, who led the NFL in rushing touchdowns. So you can't, sort of give him the pass there. But if Penny does go down, does it automatically become Swift stays in the same role that they're going to use him in, and they put in, let's say, Boston Scott or maybe Kenneth Gainwell? I'd probably say more Boston Scott, because I think that's more he profiles as a first and second down runner as opposed to Gainwell. Or, we've seen this general manager before be aggressive and go out and get somebody. Remember when their previous Super Bowl run, they went out and they got Jay Ajayi. So they could, still kick the tires on somebody at some point in camp, or, let's say one of Zeke, Fournette, Hunt, even Dalvin Cook doesn't get signed. That's somebody that they bring in early in the season if there's an injury. So I think you got to factor that in just with this team, because that's Howie Roseman's MO. But I think Swift is in a great spot. It's a contract year. I know that's not very good for running backs anymore, but we saw what that meant for Saquon and Josh Jacobs, guys that had battled some injuries and finally put it all together. Again, different level. I don't want to compare them to those guys, but I'm getting at guy that finally maybe has that complete season. It's going to have to come with more production on the ground and not through the air, because how this team operates. And then you still have the Jalen Hurts factor, who is going to get his chances, certainly at the goal line with the push. That's still, for some reason, legal.
All right, the Devon A-Chain is another rankings faller for Jamie. Right now, he's RB 42 in ADP. A-Chain, why is he a faller?
So first off, obviously there's still the Dalvin Cook news hanging out there that the Dolphins may sign him. But I think it's just time to stop ignoring the fact that as long as they're healthy, Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert are going to be the guys that get the most touches in this Dolphins backfield. And so you haven't really heard a lot of buzz about A-Chain so far in practice, which is, I don't necessarily think that's telling, but it's also telling of a player who's supposed to be as fast as he is, that isn't getting a lot of publicity. And I've just, obviously we live in South Florida, so I pay attention a lot to the Dolphins, whether it's just by osmosis of, turn on the radio or just, talking to people. And, I have a few connections still to cover the team. And I was listening to David Furones, who covers and this happened to me a few last week at some point, it wasn't just this, but David Furones covers the team for the Sun Sentinel. And he was asked, what about the backfield, because Dalvin Cook, whatever. And he was like, Jeff Wilson, Raheem Mostert, still the guys. They're excited about A-Chain. That's all you hear. They're excited about A-Chain. They're excited about A-Chain. Is he going to get enough touches if they're healthy? And the other part of this is Savon Ahmed is somebody that they're getting a lot of buzz about. And so is it just too crowded a backfield for a rookie to come in and leap over, especially a small rookie, to leap over Wilson and Mostert without those guys getting hurt? And so I don't have a problem drafting A-Chain. I think he's got a chance to be, you used the word gadget player, Adam, for them, and I don't think that's a bad call. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think we could see him, get some opportunities to make plays, hopefully in the passing game. That isn't really Tua's MO. That isn't really this offense's MO if you go back and just, marry it to Kyle Shanahan's system. But there is a chance for him to still be, on the field enough and to get enough chances. But I think it's going to take an injury to probably both of them, and we may not see it until later in the season. So I put him third among the Dolphins running backs. I don't think there's a strong enough argument to say there's not more upside for him, because there might be. But I think Wilson and Mostert still enough cachet on this team with this coach and what they showed last year that they're going to be better than A-Chain for at least this season.
Okay. Michael Pittman is a round 6 pick currently in ADP, wide receiver 32. Pittman's going behind Ayuk, behind Deontay Johnson and Tyler Lockett, ahead of Mike Evans and Marquise Brown. Where do you find yourself ranking Michael Pittman, Jamie?
Behind these guys also. It's just it's hard to trust, with what the flaws will be. Anthony Richardson can be a great fantasy quarterback. We had this conversation, Adam, on the phone, driving into work. We were talking about some quarterback situations, and what would the Colts do next year if they have the number 1 overall pick?
This was the fun
of this.
I think that if they end up with the number 1 overall pick, it is Caleb Williams City, and I'm sorry, they will figure out a trade partner for Anthony Richardson.
They might, Jim Irsay's not crazy at all. So, I think unless Richardson just falls on his face, I would probably say they go Marvin Harrison and pair him with Richardson and, try to give him that weapon that most of these young quarterbacks need. But look, if he flops, this clearly ties into Pittman. If he flops as a passer, Pittman's not going to be good. And, I think Pittman's going to need a lot of volume. I don't think he's going to get it. We saw that last year. So it's just, as much as I hope to see Anthony Richardson be a successful passer, I can't trust it enough to buy into Michael Pittman as anything more than a good number 3 receiver that you settle for in PPR and more of a number 4 receiver in non-PPR.
How about this? This is a little sort of it's not counterintuitive. I mean, it seems counterintuitive, but it isn't. I am so low on Anthony Richardson as a passer this year that I actually think I should be higher on Michael Pittman, because I am expecting some Gardner Minshew this year.
That's fair point.
And I think Minshew would be very good for Pittman. I think
I would agree.
So much better than the crap that they had last year. I look at Pittman. I looked at some of the numbers this morning, advanced metrics. It doesn't paint the picture of a great wide receiver. He's not a big play guy. He doesn't make a lot of explosive plays. He hasn't so far through 3 seasons. He has a high catch rate. He's been a good yards per catch, good yards per target guy. He's nice, solid receiver. And I think he could have, within the Minshew games, I think he'd be a must start as a number 2 guy, I'd say. But in the Richardson games, I'm terrified.
Right. How many Minshew games are there going to be?
Yeah, I don't know. Should I even factor that in, or just, assume it's going to be Richardson, and if it's Minshew, great. But should I even factor that in at all if I'm drafting?
There could be 3 or 4 games this year where Pittman benefits from Minshew playing. But I almost think in order for that to really make a difference in fantasy, Richardson's going to have to get hurt in the early portion of the season or miss games. Maybe he has to go and get another nasal surgery. And Minshew just catches fire and the Colts are winning. And that would mean that Minshew would continue to start and Pittman would continue to be great. Yeah, I almost think that that's Pittman's best path.
Oh,
he hasn't been a red zone dominator yet in his career. Richardson in the red zone last year threw about 60% of his targets to wide receivers, only 6 touchdowns in 12 games to wide receivers. So I think with Pittman, he's barely a number 3 receiver in full PPR for me.
JSN or Pittman?
I currently have Pittman just based on the volume that I think he'll get, but it's getting close.
Yeah, they're 3 spots apart from me right now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, they're farther than that for me, but it's close. They're 8 spots apart among the receivers.
I just want to remind everyone, Gardner Minshew's rookie season, DJ Chark was a top 20 wide receiver, 19th per game. He's been pretty good for wide receivers.
What did he do last year in his 2 games?
Great. I mean, he threw for a ton of yards. He threw for like 275 yards. Well, I'll tell you exactly.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you how many fantasy points he got to his
355
receivers.
yards and 274 yards in 2 games for the Eagles last year.
Okay.
he also
AJ
had
Brown and
AJ
Devontae
Brown
Smith.
and Devontae Smith.
Yeah, those guys went bananas.
Talking about
I will say this though, just in regard to Pittman, Adam. So we did our pick by pick draft yesterday, and it's PPR. We start 3 receivers. I was very torn between Pittman and Gabe Davis. I took Pittman. You took Davis. 1 pick later. So I was struggling with that one.
Oh yeah.
I kind of get taking Davis over Pittman.
There's more upside, but again, if Richardson surprises us and is a better passer than we expect,
he hasn't surprised so far.
Well, he's barely played with the first team offense.
Yeah.
Well, that's another issue.
That was a PPR league we did yesterday.
Yes.
Whatever. Gabe Davis is so interesting because I philosophically think it's better, if you have guys that are similar, to take the number 2 guy on a great passing offense over the number 1 guy on a bad passing offense. There's so many examples. I mean, I'm sure there are exceptions, but philosophically, I would say Gabe Davis. But Gabe Davis, I mean,
I'd rather have T. Higgins than Michael Pittman too. Yeah.
Such a low catch guy, Gabe Davis. So as much as I like him, and we always talk about how much we like Gabe Davis, the catches are going to be really low. In PPR, he's one of the guys that's a huge difference depending on the format.
Well, we had similar builds, not to give away these stories that were going to be out at the end of the week, but you went with 1-2 receivers at that point, and those 2 were AJ Brown in round 2 for you and Amari Cooper in round 4, and this was Gabe Davis in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in round 7. So that was your 3rd receiver, but you had your quarterback and tight end at that point. For me, I had more running backs, and a quarterback, but I also went with Amon-Ra St. Brown in round 2 and T. Higgins in round 3. So this was also my 3rd receiver in round 7. And so again, like I was saying, I think from a floor perspective in PPR, I don't mind Pittman as a 3rd receiver, but I think in terms of like who has more upside, Gabe Davis, I think definitely has more upside.
In retrospect, sorry to get off track here, but these are such interesting decisions. I struggled so much with that AJ Brown pick in full PPR because Garrett Wilson and Amon-Ra St. Brown went right after him, and it was between those 3 for me. You took Amon-Ra. But in retrospect, AJ Brown and Gabe Davis in full PPR, you need some touchdowns, so that's maybe not something you want to do. Of course, I didn't plan it that way. It was a round 2 and a round 7 pick, but
sure,
something to think about. All right. How about George? Let's finish up here with George Pickens, TJ Hawkinson, and for Dave, Breece Hall has been a faller. George Pickens, currently wide receiver 35 in ADP. Why is he a faller for you, Jamie?
I just don't trust Kenny Pickett. I really don't. And Pickens has had some nice plays. He's certainly talking a good game about what his expectations are for this season. But the last time a Steelers receiver talked a big game, he got traded to Chicago. It's going to be really, really interesting to see how these targets go. I don't think Deontay Johnson's targets are going anywhere. He's still going to be the go-to guy in this offense. But Pickens just makes me nervous, So it's not so much that I doubt the talent. I just doubt the system, and I doubt the quarterback. So he's dropped a few spots for me.
I'm too aggressive on Pickens. I love the talent. I love that he's a 2nd-year player with a franchise that's produced excellent wide receivers. And by all accounts, it's Pickett who's taking a step forward.
I hope so.
The ball with
I
the
really
Steelers.
do.
I hope so as well. I know that offensive line is going to be better this year. That'll give him a little more time. and they're trying to get things going downfield. And that's where Pickens really excelled. He was dominant in contested catches last year, 5th best in success rate among all qualifying receivers, caught almost 68% of his contested catches, had 28 contested catch targets. I think there's a chance he
Why
could
is he having
actually
so many contested catches? Because his quarterback stinks.
well, right, but maybe the quarterback gets a little bit better and the offense gets a little bit better.
I hope
It
so.
would not surprise me if he ended up having more targets this year than Deontay Johnson.